Hi, and welcome to Answers News for Monday, June the 17th. I'm Avery Foley. I'm here with guest again, Roger Patterson. You've been on here a lot the last couple of weeks.
Lots of people traveling, and so I get to fill in a lot.
Well, we appreciate you being here. And we have Bodie Hodge. You're back. You were gone on Thursday. You bailed on us, but you're back again today, so that's good.
Yeah. Kids baseball, telling you.
Oh, that's what
you ditched us for your kids.
They were in the state tournament, and they made it to the Final Four.
Oh, wow.
And they would have won that one if it had not been for an incredible shortstop play, making a diving catch. Otherwise, we would have walked it off. It was that close. So kudos to that kid, for making that catch.
So close. All right. Well, as we're waiting for people to jump on here, we wanted to talk a little bit about the upgrade coming to the Stargazers Planetarium. So we have the planetarium here at the Creation Museum. Really popular. People absolutely love it. It's probably one of my favorite features of the Creation Museum. I love it. But the technology is getting older, and technology from, 12 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, is really old compared to today's technology. What was cutting edge then, not so much now. So it is getting a bit of an overhaul, a complete overhaul. We're getting a laser projector instead of the bulb projector, which we can't really get parts for anymore.
And even the one we had back then was state of the art.
For 10 years ago.
And it was upgraded a few years ago as well. So,
so
that's
so
one
we're
of the things we do here at the
museum.
We tend to stay on top of the technology, trying to keep things upgraded and keep it going. So, if you came to the Creation Museum 10 years ago, come back, you guys will be in shock.
You'll see new things. For sure. So we are doing a fundraising campaign to raise the money to upgrade the planetarium, so we'll be able to do even more programs, reach more people with that. So you can learn more about everything that's going on, everything we're upgrading, and all the exciting details at answersingenesis.org/donate. You can learn all about that.
Yeah, boy, I'm seeing people from all over the country, some from all over the world popping on.
We got people from the UK here. Ohio, Oklahoma.
I've got my Idaho person on there.
There you go.
There you go. Got to have a token Idahoan just for you.
We also wanted to mention that our One Race, One Blood conference it's coming up in October, but the early bird ends June 30th. So that's going to be a really great conference. I believe you're speaking at that.
I'll be there. Dr. Bodie Bauckham, Dr. Charles Ware. We've got
Dr. Johnny Hunt.
Yep. It's pretty exciting.
It's going to be a great lineup. It's at the Ark Encounter. You get complimentary admission to the Ark and to the Creation Museum with that. And the early bird ends in just like 2 weeks. So if you want to register for that, it's open. It's a Answers for Pastors and Christian Leaders conference, but it's open to anyone who wants to attend. And we really encourage everyone to come.
Even sponsor your own pastor to come to an event like that and be able to get some
for Sunday
training.
school teachers or anyone, they would really enjoy this. It's pretty open.
Answersforpastors.org is where to go to get all the details and to register for that before the early bird ends.
Yeah. So something else, here at the ministry, we kind of behind the scenes have those little calendars that have little phrases on it. And last week, Avery Foley was featured on one. You didn't know I was doing this.
I did not know you were doing this. Oh, great.
This was last Wednesday. And what it is, if someone overhears you say something, they send it in. And
they put it in this thing with no context whatsoever. So it's just your statement with no context.
Makes it funny.
It's hilarious.
So here's a quote from Avery Foley.
That's fun.
Today is Bad Friday because it's Wednesday.
I don't remember saying that, to be honest.
I could see you saying that.
It ended up in the I overheard file and ended up on our calendar that was given out to all the employees.
I mean, who hasn't had one of those days where you're like, oh man, it's so awesome to be Friday, and then you realize it's like Tuesday, and you're like, what? It's only Tuesday?
Well, anyway.
Yeah, you didn't know I was doing that.
I get the days wrong on this show all the time. So much that the person who gets our articles prepped started putting the day in like big, bold capital letters because I can never remember whether it's Monday or Thursday.
We call that Avery font.
I blame it on the fact that I have 2 young children. That's just what I'm blaming on. Now, the person here is from Idaho in all caps, so shout out to you. All right, I also decided to include some pictures of my kids because I got to control the slides today, so I can. Man. So that's my daughter Felicity. She's 9 months old. She's really cute. Everybody knew her on the show before she was born because I was pregnant on the show for like forever.
Yeah, but we announced it here.
Yeah, and we announced it live on the show to my in-laws who were in the audience. That was fantastic. And then that's my son Winston, who's 2.5. So there's your cuteness overload for the day because they're both really adorable. Okay, so now we'll get into our fluff item. This one was really funny. I just couldn't help including this on our list. Pennsylvania man, traffic circles are causing all of these tornadoes. So apparently they've been having a higher than usual number of tornadoes in Pennsylvania. And one local resident has an idea of what's causing them. And he says it's all the traffic circles they've been installing.
You know, roundabouts.
Well, you know, that really does kind of make sense, because when we think about a tornado, it's a cyclonic low pressure system. It spins counterclockwise. I guess I got to go this way for the camera. Spins counterclockwise. And which way do we drive around those circles? Counterclockwise. Yep. And so all of that current could just be stirring up the atmosphere.
That's what he says. He says when people go round and round in circles, it causes disturbance in the atmosphere and causes tornadoes.
All right, but I've got a perfect scientific test for this.
Okay.
Because we know that over in the UK, they drive on the other side of the road.
And they have lots of roundabouts there.
Lots of them there. So we should expect all of the tornadoes in the UK to spin the opposite direction. So if we went over there and tested that, we could actually scientifically validate this idea. I don't think it's going to happen.
I feel like it wouldn't be scientifically validated, though. I don't think traffic circles are causing tornadoes.
It's funny, some of the things that people bring up to try to explain things. And, you know, this is one of those examples. And even then, you know, they're saying, hey, we're having an unusually high number of tornadoes. But are they really? I actually looked up the history of tornadoes that are occurring in Pennsylvania. And, you know, it tends to vary. I think on average you have about 12 per year. But there are some years, like in 1985, they had 33. In 1992, they had 31. Guess how many they had this year? As of the end of May?
19.
They had 16.
Oh, close.
So they still have a ways to go to even get to their max.
It's the traffic circles, man.
Yes, Bodie will appreciate this comment from Joyce. Did the guy from PA use circular reasoning to reach that conclusion?
Well,
Very
it was
clever.
Definitely arbitrary of some sort. I'll give him that.
All right, so that's our fun one, because we always talk about most of the news is not that happy news. So we like to have a fun one at the beginning to, you know, lighten things up a little bit.
Get things going.
Someone here said they're from Wales and they can't wait for the UK conference in October. So yeah, that's coming up as well. A bunch of our speakers will be headed to, as well as our UK speakers will be there for that. So you can find more information about that on our website as well.
Yeah.
Lots of exciting stuff happening. There's always exciting stuff happening around here. Okay, so after that one, we're going to go to this next one, this next item. Have a good laugh first.
Someone put on here about that circular reasoning too. So there's people, they're catching these.
Yeah, they're catching.
Snapchat issues quickly polls love has no age filter for LGBT Pride Month. So the social media platform Snapchat, super popular, particularly with like teenagers, they have a Love Has No Labels campaign going on with these special filters you can apply to your photos in Snapchat. And one of the filters at the beginning of the month was Love Has No Age. So they had like Love Has No Gender, Love Has No Race, Love Has No Religion, and then Love Has No Age. But after only 2 days, they pulled that, probably because a bunch of people were like, why do you have a filter like that? You're trying to normalize pedophilia. It's the only way that you can explain them having a filter like that. So they pulled the filter, but this just kind of shows where our culture is headed. And Christians have been saying this for years, that where do you stop? Where do you draw the line if the Bible is not the ultimate standard for morality?
You're normalizing sin with all of the other filters, and it's true across all the social media platforms with the backgrounds of the flags, especially during June and all of those pieces. Just trying to normalize something that God calls sin. And they can't draw that line consistently because they have no authority to base those things on. And when we look to God's word, we can see that all of those things violate his created order for sexuality, that it should be one man, one woman for life in that marriage relationship. And that's the only acceptable form of that.
You know, it's interesting. It says in here, you know, and you kind of quoted this, love has no gender, race, or religion, and so forth. You realize the God of the Bible is love. He's the absolute standard for love. If you actually think about other religions, should love even have a basis in some of these other religions? Like in an atheistic, materialistic worldview, which there's a number of religions that are materialistic in their outlook, if everything's material, love isn't material. So by rights, love doesn't exist in those religions. You know, they may, you know, appeal to it, that sort of thing, but really what they're doing is borrowing from a Christian worldview. You know, I think of some of the Eastern religions, Hinduism and things like that, where they say all is one, you know, all is spirit, all is one. Love is the same thing as hate. You know, when you think about that, if they're consistent in their religion. So really what they're doing is they're borrowing love from a Christian worldview, from a biblical worldview in particular here,
And then redefining it by their own terms.
And trying to redefine it.
But it's an experience that all humanity has. It's one of those common things, but
because they're all made in the image of a loving God.
In the image of a loving God who's given them those things. And of course, with so many of God's good gifts, we tend to pervert them and twist them to our own destruction.
One of the things it says in this article, very last line, says 41% of underage victims, this is of pedophilia, were targeted through Snapchat in the year 2016.
So important for parents and others to know what your kids are involved in as they're using their phones and these apps. And
well, apparently 90% of the 190 million daily users are between the ages of 13 and 24. So, pedophiles, they know that. They're going out there, they're targeting kids. So, yeah, parents need to be aware.
This next one also comes from LifeSite News. UN human rights official. It's clear U.S. pro-life laws are torture. So this is the United Nations Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights, Kate Gilmore, who is commenting on some of the pro-life laws that have been passed here in the United States, restricting or even banning abortions. And she's claiming that these are extremist hate, gender-based violence against women. It's clear it's torture. It's a deprivation of a right to health, she claims.
Yeah, like we kind of mentioned last week in one of those stories, the language is starting to shift as these laws are passed, and they're using terms like forced pregnancy laws. Well, if you stop and think about it, that's not quite how it works. The woman had to be pregnant in the first place, so that was her choice to engage in that activity that brought about the pregnancy. Yes, of course, there will be exceptions to that in a very, very small number. But that just shifts the responsibility away from the woman in the first place who engaged in the act that got her pregnant, and removes any of that responsibility for her if she can just get rid of that pregnancy, as they would like to think about it.
And see, they keep calling it things like right to health or women's rights. What about the rights of the baby?
Yeah,
what about the rights of
completely
children,
ignore that and act like they don't,
Or
that's
the
not even a
fathers
person
who often
exists.
don't want these things
Yes,
to
And
continue.
it's interesting, they say, the pro-life laws are torture, but, cutting up babies apparently isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's shocking when you actually step back and think about what's going on here. I mean, would this person actually volunteer herself to go be cut apart just the same way abortion would have it, just to prove that it's not torture? Absolutely, they wouldn't do that.
Of course, yeah,
So.
yeah. And I mean, the fact that she's comparing this to, and her words, extremist hate, like those are the phrases the media uses to describe things like terrorism or the horrible mass shootings that have taken place. They call that extremist hate. And to say that wanting to save the lives of unborn children is the same thing as that is just appalling.
It is.
What's good is evil and evil is good.
Yes.
When that
Yeah.
type of language is used.
It really, you can see the kind of the mask is coming off the pro-abortion movement, and they're showing themselves to be pro-abortion. Like they're not pro-choice, that's what they claim. They're not. They're pro-abortion, and that's just becoming more and more clear.
Yeah.
And it all goes back to the libertinism of the free sexual expression in every way that you want it to happen, not having to face any consequences for that. If there's no higher authority over me, then I don't have anyone to answer to for how I use my body. But when, again, we go back to a biblical perspective, God is the one who's created us. He's the one we're accountable to for what he's given us.
And that baby is made in the image of God, and it has a right to life, and it has unique dignity and value and worth because that baby has been made in the very image of God.
Yeah.
Why didn't this UN human rights official direct this to, say, Saudi Arabia or one of these other places that oppose it as well? You see, it's a specific attack on the U.S. and on the right to life movement that's going on here. But it's interesting, the term rights in the first place. Rights are a concept that come from the Bible. We're endowed with certain rights that come from our Creator. As an example, that's actually stated in some of our founding documents. See, rights are a Christian concept. Once again, in an atheistic worldview, what are rights? It's not made out of material.
Where do they come from?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Rights and having no rights are one and the same in, say, a Hindu philosophy or a New Age philosophy, that sort of thing. So it's interesting. They're borrowing that terminology once again, and then they're trying to use it for a bad purpose. So.
Someone in the comments here said, "Thank you for doing this. It is helping me and my children. For years I asked questions, but no one in the church could give me good answers. The Holy Spirit opened my eyes and the Bible has all the answers." So we're glad that people find this show helpful and that helping them build a biblical worldview and think through what's happening in the news and stuff. It's always encouraging to hear from people who
there's a good
find the show
comment in
helpful.
here too. They said, with regards to abortion here, they're into murdering babies as much as the Canaanites would throw theirs into the fires of Baal, still making excuses for it. That's mentioned
It's
there
really,
in Leviticus.
yeah, that's really sad to see. All right, one more sad one, and then we have a happy one, I promise. Actually, this is a happy one. I just, what am I saying? I just read the title wrong.
Yeah, we've got this actually right here. It's the Sanctity of Life DVD series. It's got Dr. Georgia Purdom, Dr. David Menton, and Dr. Tommy Mitchell, I think, are the three. There's 4 DVDs, but there's 3 of them that were involved in this. And it's a really powerful series looking at things like eugenics as well as abortion and some of those sanctity of life issues. But this is a really powerful set here.
Okay, so here's a good one. We do have some good news. Trump administration halts fetal tissue research by government scientists. So very recently, the Trump administration decided to halt government-funded, so scientists who receive government funding using the tissues from children who have been killed by abortion for research, which is a really great thing for the sanctity of human life, recognizing the humanity of those children and that their bodies don't deserve to be used in that way. But the article, this article comes from Canada, from the CBC, commenting on this. When you read through the article, the bias of the reporters is so evident. Like, they are clearly not happy about this, and they only interview scientists who are upset about it. They don't interview any scientists who are like, yeah, there's great alternatives to fetal tissue that we can use. And it really was... The bias was just overwhelming as you read through this article.
And as you think about the philosophy that's being endorsed here, we think of it as a utilitarian philosophy. They see these little babies as commodities that can be used to bring benefit to others. So they're basically saying, if we kill some babies, we could use their bodies for research, and then that would help other babies survive, or other people have a better quality of life and other things. So the basic idea is we're going to kill so that we can possibly save lives. That just, there's no moral foundation.
That's what the Nazis were trying to say. You know, I mean, it was the same thing. You know, if we can wipe out some of these Jews over here and do experiments on them and the gypsies and whoever else, maybe we can help other people survive. I mean, it's the exact same argument.
Yeah.
The key is the target group, you know, where they were attacking Jews and Poles and things like this, you know, over in Europe in the 1930s and 40s. Boom, it's the children, the babies of today that are being attacked.
We want to see, when we think about medical care from a biblical perspective, we're often reversing the effects of the fall and of the curse and seeking to eliminate human suffering in those things.
We're trying to fight against death.
Yeah. And as we do that, we also have to think about the other considerations. That's a good thing, a moral good, to be able to relieve suffering. But we don't bring about death or evil or use those things to bring about good. That should be the exact opposite the way a Christian approaches those moral issues.
And we know from like undercover videos from people who've gone into Planned Parenthood, we know they're selling aborted baby parts. So if you are going to keep buying those, you're just fueling the industry, fueling Planned Parenthood to push more women towards abortion, because they'll not only make money off the abortion, they'll make money off of the baby as well. So you can't, like, this is just wrong, because it helps to fuel the abortion industry. And
to that point, one of the scientists is quoted as saying, prohibiting valuable research that uses fetal tissue that is otherwise going to be discarded doesn't make any sense. But that's a very dehumanizing way to talk about it.
Yes.
Well, you can tell the bias in here, like you said. One of the things it says is ideologues should not be allowed to stand in for real doctors and scientists when government is making decisions about life-saving medicine. Well, hold it. Isn't that what they're doing? They're an ideologue here.
Yeah, they have their own.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're just doing the same thing they're just saying.
Refuted themselves. But
yes.
You know, why not use taxpayer funding to promote alternatives? Why not?
You know, it'd be a great thing.
I mean, we're seeing incredible advancements that way. Why halt that?
This is a good step in the direction of not commodifying human life and treating it like it's just that utilitarian perspective. So we've got another fun one here, also ironically from the CBC as well. We got 2 in a row from Canada. But this research doesn't come from Canada. It comes from Thailand. We don't have elephants in Canada. But the elephant's mathematical trunk can smell numbers.
Well, not quite.
Real catchy title, not quite accurate. But basically what they found was if they put sunflower seeds, which are apparently one of the elephant's favorite foods, I didn't know that, if they put a bunch in one bucket and slightly less or in another bucket, and then made lids so that the elephants couldn't see what was inside, but they could smell what was inside, the elephants could actually detect which bucket had more in it and which one had less, and they'd go for the bucket with more almost all the time.
You know, so if you blindfolded me and put a plate of a whole bunch of bacon in front of me, and one had like one piece. I'm pretty sure I could tell which one it would be.
That's a pretty big difference, and bacon is a pretty strong smelling food.
So we can see how this would be an adaptation that would be beneficial to the elephants as they're foraging for food in the wild. They're going to use their noses to find fruits. If there's a bush over here that has 10 berries on it and a bush over here that has 100, and they can smell that difference, they'll be able to maneuver to that. We know elephants have relatively poor eyesight, and so here's an example of how God has given this creature the ability to detect those things in its environment. And I would suspect the basic mechanism is there's a higher concentration of those odor-causing particles when there's more food present in the bucket than there is with a small amount. And so the elephant is able to detect that, much like when your grandma wears way too much perfume and you can smell her across the room and you know to stay on the other side. But
there's a lot more packed into these trunks than I thought.
yeah.
There's pretty cool research showing how sensitive their noses are. And,
You know, if I had a nose
another
like that, I
example
could
of God's
probably smell
design.
really good.
Yeah.
You would smell really good if you had a nose
if I
like
had
that?
a nose like that, yeah.
You'd look a little scary, I think, if you had a nose like that. This one also comes from LifeSite News. Prolife Unplanned movie finally coming to Canada after months of demand. So back a couple of months ago, the movie Unplanned, which follows the story of former Planned Parenthood clinic director Abby Johnson and her journey from working at Planned Parenthood to becoming a pro-life advocate. And it did really well here in the United States. People loved it. I think it ranked number 4
that weekend,
for a while there. So it did extremely well. But unfortunately, the major theater company that distributes films in Canada, Cineplex, would not allow this film to be shown. Basically, they don't like the message. They didn't want it to be shown. And so people have been petitioning to try and get Unplanned to be allowed to come to Canada. And
I think there's 100,000 signatures on the petition.
Yeah. Which is a good amount.
A lot,
so it's coming to some independent Canadian theaters. Sadly, Cineplex is still not going to show it, but some of the independent Canadian theaters are, which is fantastic. So if this is in your area, go see it. Support the film. Take your friends with you. It's a great way to open conversations.
So Unplanned is unbanned.
Sort of.
And as you think about films like these and different opportunities to connect, maybe this is a chance to engage with friends or loved ones who are on the other side of this issue, encouraging them to see these things. Take it that step further. Really go into the real basis, rather than just looking to the scientific arguments and the emotional arguments. Connect these things back to God's word and the authority of his word, that he's the one who has made us in his image. He's the one who has called us to obey him, and when we rebel, it's the gospel that we need for whether it's somebody caught up in performing abortions and thinking that's right, or whatever that sinful activity is. We've all rebelled against God. We all need the hope of Christ and what he's done on the cross for us to find salvation and freedom for those things. So make these into opportunities to proclaim the true gospel message that Christ is the only way to receive that forgiveness. And that forgiveness is available for anyone, regardless of whether they've been involved in an abortion or not.
Someone on here says, speaking of the article we just talked about before, my cat will always go for the bowl with the most food. It's because their cat has skills similar to the elephant.
So will my
kids. Yeah, so if you're in Canada, go to that. I think if you go to unplannedfilm.com, it'll probably have the details of what theaters are showing it and all that, probably, I would imagine. Okay, this next one comes from Australia. These parents are suing because their daughter with Down syndrome was wrongfully born. So today we had a lot of different articles talking about abortion, and this one's kind of a little bit of a different angle on that. This story has been in the news a little bit, kind of back and forth. It's in the news again because a judge basically granted the couple an extension on their request. So it's still going through the courts. And it's this couple that from Australia that are suing the medical staff at a certain clinic because they were told by the doctor and the ultrasound technician that the risk of their child being born with Down syndrome or anything like that was in the low range, and they didn't need to go and get any further testing done. So they didn't go get any further testing done. And when their daughter was born, she had Down syndrome and had to be put in the intensive care unit for a little while. And now she's 4 years old, and they're suing for wrongful birth because if they'd known their child was going to have Down syndrome, they would have had her aborted. But because they didn't know and they couldn't choose an abortion for her, and now they have her, they're suing for the cost of all her medical care, for maintenance costs for loss of future income as they have to care for this daughter, all of these things. The way this article summed it up, I thought was well done. In short, their daughter is an inconvenience, and they would like the medical professionals who failed to let them know she had Down syndrome so they could have her killed to pay for their daughter's upbringing. After all, if they'd had their way, she would be dead and they would be free. But because she ended up in their arms rather than in a dumpster, they're suing the clinic.
Yeah, and it just makes me think of the selfishness of humanity. I mean, we can take that all the way back to the garden. It's what Eve desired to please herself rather than to please God. It's the inconveniences that we don't want to have to experience, and so we're willing to take the life of someone else so that we don't have to have those inconveniences.
Well, that's what child sacrifice has always been about. Sacrifice your child so that you can have a better life.
Yeah.
Abortion and that sort of thing is no different here. And what did this child do wrong?
Right. Like
nothing.
If anyone, blame the parents.
And can you imagine growing up as that child with that knowledge and having to deal with those things?
And from a biblical worldview, I mean, we understand that because of sin, we live in a sin, cursed, and broken world, and things happen where people, struggle with different health issues or whatever, or in this case, Down syndrome. And that's, a consequence of living in a broken world. But all of us are made in the image of God. And this little girl included is made in the image of God. And our value and our worth, like we said earlier, is not based in anything like whether we're born or unborn, whether we have a disability or not. Our value is based in the fact that we're image bearers. That's her status. That's her title. She's an image bearer of the Creator. And she has value and worth because of that.
And this is something that's going to be reversed in the consummation of all things as God restores our eternal existence to the way it was before. These are things that we can look forward to not having to deal with. There won't be any of those things in the new heavens and earth where we will get to dwell with God forever. And so as we consider all of these things that happen inside of a cursed world, this is just a spontaneous mutation that there are some markers that it'll increase as a woman gets older. It's more likely to happen as the eggs are older. But there's no reason that we should punish these.
Right, it's eugenics
people.
Is what it is.
It really is.
It's
all it is this idea of well-born.
And some of you might be familiar. A lot of people with Down syndrome. They've been trying to petition the government, saying, "Hey, consider us endangered because we've been
put us on the
attacked so
endangered
much."
species list.
Begging for protection because
so many children who have Down syndrome are being killed before they're born.
And I think it can be so sweet, So.
Yeah, it's Pretty sad things we're seeing in this world. And it really just shows, we always talk about how this is a battle over foundations, right? Will you start with God's word or will you start with man's word? And in this story, like all the stories we've looked at, that's really where the battle lies, is God the authority? Does he set the rules? Do we need to live our lives according to what his word says because he is our creator, he is our lawgiver, he is our judge? Or do we set the rules? And in a secular worldview, I mean, what's happening to these parents in a secular worldview kind of makes sense. You've only got one life to live. You don't want anything that holds you back from living the life that you want. You don't want any inconveniences.
It's all about you.
It's right. In a secular worldview, that makes sense, but it's utterly opposed to the biblical worldview, where we are not our own. We belong to the Creator, and we need to live by the laws he has given us and shape our thinking to his word and die to ourselves and live for his glory and live to serve others.
Yeah, that's the ultimate expression of Christ-likeness, that we would give up our lives and give up our own selfish desires to serve and love others.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of families, you see, Christian families who have adopted children who have disabilities to show Christ's love and to show that service. Like one of my very good friends, her family has adopted multiple children with disabilities, and just to show Christ's love and to welcome those children into their family. It's amazing to see Christ's hands and feet really in action there. All right, so this last one, we're going to get a little slow for this one. Sloth's Evolutionary Secret Shock Scientist. Okay, that got really tiring even for me.
That was really boring.
I'm not used to talking slow. I get told occasionally that I talk kind of fast. So
by who?
I don't know. Random people in the comments. They're like, Avery talks fast. I don't know what you're talking about. We just talk fast in Canada. It's a thing. So this article is talking about how every single episode, it feels like, we talk about an article where everything we knew about something in an evolutionary worldview is totally rewritten.
Changed.
Yeah.
This is today's article. Everything you knew about sloth evolution, assuming that you've thought about sloth evolution before, everything you knew is wrong.
Yeah.
based on this new study.
It
So
does.
just
It says they're overturning
it.
a long-standing consensus on how the major groups of sloths are related. The results are surprising on many levels. Not only do they rewrite sloths classification, they suggest much of what we thought we knew about sloths and their evolution may be wrong.
It actually might be wrong because the Bible's history
Well,
is
of course
true.
it's
So
wrong,
everything
yeah.
you think about sloth evolution
So
is
basically,
definitely
all
wrong.
those facts that you've ever been taught about sloth evolution, all those facts are now wrong.
Yeah, so in the evolutionary worldview, what we have here is in the past, they had basically used physical characteristics to try to classify the different extinct and living fossil sloths and the living ones into different categories based on those features. So now being able to extract proteins, not DNA in this case, but they're trying to extract collagen proteins from the fossil sloths that they found, and then they can get the proteins from the living members and then compare those and try to construct an evolutionary tree based on the similarities in those collagen proteins. And so they're basically taking the sequence of the amino acids in the collagen and trying to backtrack that into what the DNA would have looked like and draw those comparisons. So again, they're starting with the basic assumption that these are all related to one another, when indeed from a biblical perspective, it's possible some of these groups, like the giant ground sloths, could have been in a different group. We've got some studies where
Created kind.
our research scientists
Yeah,
have
the
tried
key
to,
is where's that boundary of that kind.
try to identify those things. And here, again, we're looking at a restructuring of the evolutionary view based on this new evidence. But my biggest question is, how in the world do they expect collagen protein to be able to last for millions of years
That is a big
intact
problem.
inside of these fossils?
That's
Right.
soft
Collagen
tissue
is like
and-
the glue that holds your tissue and
Yeah.
muscles and stuff like that together.
How can that last for millions of years?
I know.
They never address that
Yeah.
in the article. They're just like, oh yeah, we extracted collagen from these fossils,
Yeah,
as if
from
that's not a
20
big
million
deal.
years ago or
but
so.
it's like,
That's imaginary time.
whoa, stop right there. Okay,
That should
explain
make
how
us
this can
realize
last this
that,
long.
Yeah, that time
Right.
is just a made-up
We
number.
know.
There's no way it could happen.
It is. One of the things they say in here, the very oldest DNA you can get is about 800,000 years old. Of course, they're just guessing at that. They've never observed this. That's imaginary time. But you know, it's interesting. As soon as I read that, I'm like, hold it. I've seen an article here from Brian Thomas at the Institute for Creation Research, and he was talking about how there's been, you know, some instances where people have actually extracted small amounts of DNA even from dinosaur bones, which in the secular worldview, they would put that 65 plus million years old.
Yeah.
You know, so it just goes to show they can't even get their own dates right.
Yeah, and as I've talked to Dr. Jeanson and Dr. Purdom, they've repeatedly said, we're happy if our DNA can last a few weeks in the fridge in ideal conditions.
Right.
So to expect that we'd be able to extract DNA that's 800,000 years old out of these fossils just seems absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes
Okay,
much more
so
sense
somebody
than a
on here
biblical
says, it's
worldview.
true, I'm Canadian, and I'm always told I talk fast. Some of the comments we get.
Yeah, story of my life. Story of my
Yeah.
life. All right.
I
Oh,
did
you got
want
one
to
more
recommend Dr. David Menton. He's an anatomist, and you know he's done a lot of work, you know, particularly you know when just dealing with anatomical features of the human body and that sort of thing. And he's got some DVDs that are just incredible.
He's such an interesting guy.
on a lot of things. Yeah, he really is brilliant. But one of the DVDs, excuse me, I can't say it right. DVDs that he was involved in
It's a
is called
Monday.
Evolution, Not a Chance. And, you know, Dave's got a quirky sense of humor, but I'll tell you what, with his biology and anatomy background, looking at this subject,
He was
it's
professor for a
brilliant.
really long time.
And add
Yeah.
to that some prestidigitation that you'll experience in that video.
Yeah. Yeah, he throws some offhanded humor when you're not ready for it, so be prepared for it.
All right, well, that is all the time that we have for today, but we will be back on Thursday. So hopefully you can join us again on Thursday.
All right,
God
God
bless.
bless.
Thank you.